What's going on, dudes and dudettes? So I was finally able to catch up on both the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise leading up to watching a new one this last Sunday in the theaters, and I'm just going to read both the synopsis at once so I'm able to just do this in one review instead of having to do two separate ones. So, and I'm going to try to mix both stories to try to figure out my review here. But when it comes to that first one, the film follows Mike Schmidt, a troubled security guard desperate to keep custody of his younger sister Abby, who takes a night shift at the dilapidated Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, only to discover the pizzeria's animatronic mascots come alive at night, possessed by the spirits of murdered children. They don't really explain how that happened, but that's just what happens, leading to a fight for her survival against the vengeful robots and the dark truth behind their creation linked to Mike's own lost brother. I'll get into that. The number two film follows Mike and Abby, who did survive that first movie, a year after the first film, as Abby, missing her animatronic friends, sneaks out to find them, accidentally unleashing deeper secrets from Freddy's origin and new deadlier toy animatronics, while the film flashes back to a tragic origin of the marionette spirit and a new killer. And yes, that's basically how the second one is. That's why the first one kind of felt bogged down telling the story about why this guy is trying to keep his younger sister, even though it's like they don't have a really good relationship and he's just struggling to keep his own job, and then he has to take this bad job overnight watching this broken down Chuck E. Cheese, basically what it is. But then he ends up finding out that these dead spirits of these children that were killed by this killer go into these robots somehow. I don't know how they do, but that's what ends up happening because it's not really explained. And then eventually the killer comes around and then he has to escape both those animatronics trying to kill him and the killer, but then they end up turning on their killer basically, and you don't know officially if he dies or not. But then in the second one, because in that first one there was a cop trying to help out the main guy Mike, and then you find out that her father was the one that was actually the killer of those children and ran that Fozzie Bear's place, or at least worked there, and then that's who ended up supposedly dying at the end. But then she has her own traumatic stuff of how she was brought up with him, and I guess as to why everything is happening, I don't know, she has her own issues, especially in the second one, and it's supposed to be, we're supposed to try to learn something as to why the guy, her father, was as bad as he was, even though they still don't really explain it. There's a good long scene about it, and then they don't really explain anything. We just know he was a bad guy. She's trying to escape him, and then that's kind of it. But then this different store had these better animatronics that were made, and now they're run on a Wi-Fi system basically, even though this movie is set in the early 2000s. But then they are able to go off away from the establishment, even though in the first film they weren't able to for some reason. There's some type of code you needed, and then now they're kind of out and about causing havoc and trying to kill some of the people who didn't help that spirit girl that's in now the marionette killer, who can kind of transform into other people. So she takes a hold of a couple characters in here, and then all of a sudden they can become weird stretchy animatronic people. That was the more freakier part of this franchise. Other than that, it was just kind of okay in my opinion. Like I said, the second one gets a little bit better, but it's more of a horror teen comedy type of thing, so it's not really that crazy. I know sometimes it felt like it was more serious in certain parts, and I'm just is this how the video game really is? I thought the video game was always talked about being very creepy and scary, but sometimes they just bog it down with this other side story that I don't think they really needed to. Just explain more of the backstory and how the supernatural of these murdered children go into that thing, and now it's that's not even important technically in the second one. But either way, I guess I enjoyed it enough, and I'm sure it's gonna make enough money to make another one, so we'll see where they go from here.